reveal the truth.
We all need to learn as much as we can about everything that we can, because one thing I have learned in my life is that most of what we have ever been taught has been a lie, has been a lie, has been a lie, has been a lie, has been a lie.
All right, everyone. We're back for hour 2 of the Truth Underground show on WGSO Radio 990 on your AM dial or live stream over the internet at WGSO.com. Certainly listen on the go if you're on your smartphone using the TuneIn app. My name is Jim Rivas. I'm your host and guide into the WAP, the world of alternative possibility. And for the next hour, we're going to shift a little deeper into the rabbit hole. Lines are open. You can join the conversation tonight and every Wednesday night from 7 to 10 p.m. Central. Dial in at 504-556-9696. Now, in the last hour, and I've noticed when we talk about certain topics, technical difficulties seems to ensue. No exception tonight. So our special guest tonight is a bit of a controversial figure in and of himself, and we don't know if that was the cause of the technical disruptions, if we're imagining things, if our equipment just has ghosts in the machine. We just don't know. Yeah, one of the objectives here at the Truth Underground show, as we move into the part of the show series, if you will, where we're trying to understand who the they is, and by that I mean who or what is behind this great deception that we live in humanity. Because obviously the tempo, the frequency, the shriekness of this obfuscation that happens in front of us is just coming in a ever-increasing tempo, rate, frequency. How many people do you know who are just unplugging now, who are just saying they had enough, they can't hear it, just because they're almost like their minds are glazed over just because too much information. You know, it's obviously the standard response to a shooting event like at Parkland. You know, it's all about gun grab again. So this is all predictable. It's happening over and over. As soon as you heard about Parkland shooting, you knew it was coming next if you've been paying attention at all. Now, what you may not have been ever exposed to is the topic we're going to swing into here with our special guest, Jeffrey Doherty. A lot of us, especially in New Orleans, you know, Catholics, Christians, Judeo-Christian followers, and we've never stopped to think that perhaps this entire framework of belief system has been modified to serve these interests, whoever they are or whatever they are, over time. Yet, in my own research, which is what brought us to this level of the study, is that there's been a hidden hand scrambling the eggs, if you will, of information for control purposes for a long, long time. And so to get a perspective on that, we have a special guest tonight. His name is Jeffrey Doherty. You may have heard of him before. You may have not. Now, Jeffrey, he's a Bible college graduate, spent over 20 years as a licensed minister, during which he discovered his gifts of healing and exorcism. Now, he also saw cracks in the foundation of big-time religion and set out to pursue answers on his own. This ongoing journey has led to development of NCK, New Cosmic Knowledge, an expanded body of spiritual technologies that Jeffrey uses to help people all over the world while continuing in his parabiblical and paranormal research. He also hosts weekly Christian Whistleblower radio program and is the author of several books, including Apostle Paul, Antichrist, Jesus of Christ, Assault on Aquarius, September 23rd, 2017, the Revelation 12 sign. So without any further ado, let's welcome Jeffrey Doherty to the Truth Underground. Jeffrey, you there?
I'm here, Jim. It's an honor to be with you on the Truth Underground and WGSO.
Well, it's great. Glad you could join us. We've had a little bit of audio difficulty tonight, which happens sometimes when we tend to swing into hotter topics, so to speak. Very much looking forward to this interview tonight. I've been very interested in this line of research and your work particularly. So thanks for taking the time for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you very much. It's very humbling.
Well, why don't you take us through, we in the introduction bio, I was able to see the path to your research. Tell us more about how the evolution from being a minister essentially into looking at, I assume, the Bible, the written works that guide us, and saying, well, wait a minute, there might be something not copacetic with all that.
Absolutely. I remember probably the proudest day of my life to that point was when I was licensed as a minister with the Assemblies of God. I thought that the Assemblies of God was at this point of the spear of the movement of God on planet Earth, and being licensed with that denomination, to me, was like the epitome of my whole life. I was very, very proud to be there. And I was sold out the whole route, Jim. I really was. I believed 100%. I believed that I should find everything I do in the Bible and do everything I find in the Bible. And I was very, very committed. And strangely enough, I think that's what led me to where I am today, because the more I got into independent study and the more I got into actually getting beyond what I was told and studying the Bible for myself, I began to see, like you said, cracks in the foundation. And what I really began to see was two differing religions within the Bible. There was the religion, and if we talk about just the New Testament, there was the spirituality, if you will, of the Christ, and then there was the religion of Paul. And I began to see that those were two very different things, two very competitive things, and really two mutually exclusive things. And Jim, my job is not to tell people what to believe. If people want to be a Pauline Christian, I spent 6 years in the United States Air Force. I support and have defended their right to do so. If people want to follow the teachings of the Christ, I also support their right to do that. And I also think, Jim, that people have the right to as much information as possible to be able to use that information to make the best decision possible. So I think probably my main job is to show people that the religion of Christianity and the religion, if you will, of the Christ are not the same thing. And in fact, I'm convinced after now 35 years of study and actually over 100,000 hours of study in the biblical text, that not only is Christianity a fear and guilt control matrix, but it's mutually exclusive to the teachings of the Christ.
Well, it certainly feels like it, which is one of the things that brought me to wonder about it and do some research about it. Really, since I was very young, I had this, and this is a personal observation, just there was something out of alignment about it. And I guess that's what you're talking about. In other words, the message, the spirituality, and connecting with Christ and what we know of as God, the Creator, through religion. That was the whole spirituality side. Yet, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Truth Underground show on WGSO Radio 990 on your AM dial. This is Jim Rivas, your guide through the Forbidden Zone, as we pursue actual truth. Join the call tonight, 504-556-9696, and join the conversation. Now back into the world of alternative possibilities, the WAP as we call it here, with our special guest, Jeffrey Doherty. Jeffrey has done some pretty extensive research into biblical texts as well as Judeo-Christian writings, and has come to some very, very interesting and worthy of discussion conclusions. There's certainly theories about what he's uncovered there. So back to you, Jeffrey. Keep going. I find all this very fascinating myself.
Excellent. It really is, and it's not something that I woke up this morning not thinking about. It's something that's again over now 35 years, which kind of dates me and makes me feel a little bit old. But they say old age is tough, but it does beat the alternative, I guess, right?
Right. I think so. Room temperature, you mean?
Absolutely. And it really boils down to, I think, two key points, and maybe we can talk about the first one first. The real difference, I think, is that big-time religion, and by this I mean Roman Catholicism and Roman Protestantism, because it really is Roman Protestantism, even though our Protestant friends would vehemently disagree. They both teach that we are we're born with original sin. We're filled with original sin. At best, we can be sinners saved by grace. And original sin basically means that because of what Adam did, from the time we take our first breath, we're guilty, and we're subject to this paradigm that says, you're a sinner, you need salvation, and Christianity has the only Savior. So they've got you over a barrel. You're a sinner, you got to have salvation unless you want to go to hell, and they're the only one that has a Savior. So that, of course, breeds incredible guilt because, in effect, it's your sin that killed Jesus, quote unquote. It creates incredible fear because if you don't do what they say, when they say, how they say, and where they say, you can wind up in this place called hell where you burn forever. And that really makes you very, very easy to control. Now, conversely, Jim, Christ said, exactly, Christ said you've got the spark of divinity in you. So not only do you not have original sin, you've got the spark of divinity. You've got the seed of the divine within you. And that is a tremendous difference in paradigm. I'm not guilty. I don't need to go to any man, woman, or organization. I can go straight to the divine myself. And the Christ said that he left us the ways and the truths that lead to life, a life that's more abundant, and that he's given us peace that passes all understanding. So religion offers fear, guilt, and control, and the Christ offers a life and life more abundant and peace that passes all understanding. I don't know about you, Jim, but I really like what the Christ has to offer in comparison to what the church has to offer.
Well, absolutely. Because, my understanding is Christ's message was always to, in a day and a time when there was a lot of pagan gods and, all these different religions, it basically came down to lobby for or advertise or talk about, Creator God, the divine, the true God, and to essentially elevate people's consciousness about, spiritual things and living, as I've always read it as, hey, this is a great template for human life, a spiritual, virtuous life. And then something happened along the way, and I'm kind of queuing you up here because I know what it is, and I knew before even who you were just from my own research, and that was a little get-together. What was it, about 400 AD in Rome when the Roman Empire was basically losing its power and grip, which is when the Roman Catholic Church, if you will, became the Roman Empire extension, or Council of Nicaea, I'm referring to, of course, which is when so much of this was written into Scripture, right? What happened?
Yeah, absolutely. That's when it really began. That's when it became codified. I mean, that's when Christianity, through Constantine, was made the official religion of the Roman Empire. And that's where the conversion of the world began. People imagine these humble priests going along with their bad haircuts and robes and, preaching the gospel and the pagans flocking to them. What people don't understand is that the priests were coming in behind the Roman army, and the Roman army was saying, convert or die. So given that choice, it makes you a much better preacher, Jim. It really does.
I would think.
That's really what we saw from 400 AD. I mean, some would argue that it's even continuing to go on today. And so the Christian conversion of the world wasn't a spiritual event. It was a military conquest.
Really? Well, and I think one of the things that early on in Catholicism and being so close to the church, altar boy and all, there was just a dark feeling about some of the pageantry and the sacrament, just that whole paradigm that, for example, we go to Mass on Sundays and we eat the body of Christ and drink his blood. It's kind of a pagan thing, it's not, cannibalism just to me, I don't recall anywhere Jesus saying that that's what we're supposed to do to honor him. Where did that come from?
Yeah, that's a great observation. You walk into a Catholic church and the first thing you see, and I know this is a little bit probably upsetting, I should change my words, but the first thing you see is a dead guy on a stick up at the front of the church.
Right.
Essentially, that's what a crucifix is. It is a man nailed to a torture device, and that is the central focus of the Catholic Church. And, the Protestants like to pat themselves on the back because they don't have the dead guy on the stick. They've just got the stick. But it's really the same thing. And as you said, the central sacrament of the Roman Catholic Church is the Mass. And at least I give the Catholics credit. They admit that the doctrine of transubstantiation says we are really eating the body of Christ. We are really drinking the blood of Christ. The elements are transformed into the actual body and blood of Christ. So the Catholics at least admit that they're partaking in a human sacrifice and a cannibalistic ritual. So I do give them credit for admitting it. Question their decision to actually participate. But the Protestants try to be kindler and gentler. They try to say, oh, we took the dead guy off the stick. We just got the stick. And we're not really eating the body and the blood. It's just symbolic. But, people can do what they want. I choose not to participate in a human sacrifice in a literal, at least as the church teaches, cannibalistic exercise. And I also choose, for my own personal spirituality, not to participate in a symbolic human sacrifice or symbolic cannibalism. For me, Jim, I'd rather just do away with all of the human sacrifice, all of the cannibalism, because I don't think that helps to serve my spirituality in any way.
Well, and I have to ask forgiveness of the audience here, but I'm going to bring up a topic that's certainly, been a buzz in the alternative media world for a while now, and has bubbled up and been shoved back down with, these obfuscation events. This whole pedophilia, a satanic ritual, the fact that so many of our leaders are involved in such activities, even, conspiracy theories or whatever you want to call them, allegations that, they engage in actual ceremonies like this where, it's not Christ, but it's, human sacrifice and engaging in actually eating said humans, and as some kind of pathway to Satan or whatnot. And I didn't know that 25, 35, 45 years ago, but here it is here now. Is that true? Well, there's evidence that says it's true, and yet here it is built into the pageantry, if you will, of the church, and it really, and that's just one example. It really kind of makes you wonder, who took over the church and to what end. And that music means we're going to be up against a break. So maybe we should dive into the deep part of that answer when we get back from break here, folks. I mean, it's, I know a lot of these topics, and I know Jeffrey agrees, they can be very, uncomfortable to examine. Yet, understand, religion's about, at least in my view, it's about getting into a spiritual place and a connection with the divine. However you get there is awesome, really, in my book. And if the religious structures we know get you there, it's great. Yeah, maybe they're designed to not get you there in some ways. So anyway, folks, we've got to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Jeffrey Doherty in just a few minutes. This is the Truth Underground Show. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Truth Underground Show on WGSO Radio 990 on your AM dial. Jim Rivas here, your guide through the Forbidden Zone as we pursue the real thing, actual truth. Join us tonight. The lines are open, 504-556-9696. We'll be going to those lines here in just a little bit. However, before that, I do want to get back to our guest, Jeffrey Doherty. We have been just really kind of scratching the surface, Jeffrey, of these ideas and, the possibility. I look at it as, who's infiltrated the Bible or was it infiltrated, and what's the purpose and what evidence exists. So why don't we kick off this segment with that?
And I think that's one of the main core issues. People don't understand that. Let's just talk about the New Testament. When the New Testament was written, it was written obviously in Judea, and you have to remember that Judea was under Roman military occupation when that document was written. And there was, we have the word censorship today, and that comes from a office that a Roman officer held. He was called a censor. And what his job was to read every single document that was produced by a subject people to make certain that there was no subversion of the Roman Empire or no subterfuge or anything of that nature going on. So you have to understand that the New Testament as we have it was written, vetted, and approved by the Roman Empire. So it was the one world government of the day that read and approved the New Testament. Fast forward down to the court of King James, which was another one world government, one world empire. And King James and his merry men also read, edited, vetted, and approved what we have today as the New Testament. So you've got not only one world government, not only one new world order, but you've got two one world governments, two new world orders that have read, edited, vetted, and approved what we have today as the New Testament. Now, people that listen to this show and people that are part of this genre, we understand what governments do. We understand how governments act. We understand how governments behave. We understand that governments need to have their feet held to the fire. We understand that we can't believe everything they say, and we are very, adept and very right now courageous in questioning governments. But why in the world, when we get to this subject, does the brakes go on and no one wants to touch it? No one would accept today the Barack Obama version of the Bible. No one would accept today the Donald Trump version of the Bible. But when we accept the King James version, we're accepting a version vetted, edited, and approved by two world governments. And I'm saying the same scrutiny that we give to the government, to the Fed, to the financial system, to the entertainment industry, we should give that same scrutiny to the New Testament as well.
Well, and Jeffrey, I came to the same conclusion because I have a couple of, I call them frameworks, that I look at all truth as I do my own research to try to discern it. And anything that ends with the target or subject reader feeling helpless, powerless, out of control, and insignificant, to me, that's a language technique, right? I understand you've had some language training. I have too. And I mean, when we're doing persuasion, right, and we're trying to get a specific outcome, that's certainly an emotional target place you might want someone to be, depending on the process. And so if you wanted a population to be what, basically to not challenge your authority, you leave them in feeling insignificant, powerless, and unable to do anything about their circumstances, right?
Absolutely, and then it doesn't hurt if you can have God, quote unquote, saying that the king is the servant of God, and that if you challenge him, you deserve to be killed by the sword, and that's exactly what the Apostle Paul said.
Amazing. Well, did he say it, or did a human come along and modify something he said, or just simply add to it? I mean,
I believe that.
The Bible.
We talked about the Council of Nicaea, but I think it really started in my evidence and my research and evidence, empirical evidence has shown that what we know today as Christianity is really the birth child of a strange alliance between Saul of Tarsus, who would later go on to be the Apostle Paul. And just an interesting note, he's called an apostle some 150 times in Scripture. Only one person ever called him an apostle. That was he himself. And the one time that he's not called, and the one time he's called an apostle not by him, he's called a false apostle. So that gives you some perspective on it. But it was Saul of Tarsus and a guy that you may remember named Nero, with some assistance of King Herod and the Caiaphas, the high priest, that thought up this entire thought structure, belief structure of this thing called Christianity and rolled it out. So, yes, it was codified, and yes, it was given its real power around 300 to 400 AD. But Paul and Nero birthed it way before. And that's, they say that, the apple never falls far from the tree. And those are two pretty interesting trees to be eating apples from. Right.
So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Let's look at some of the material, specifically, or I call them reality constructs laid out in the New Testament. The big one that we talk about on the show, certainly with some of these other alternative theories that are out there about catastrophism and whatnot, would be Revelation. I've read and studied material that suggests that book was never written by any of the apostles. It was just added to and gives essentially what sounds more like a playbook when you read it, which always begs the question: is this a prophecy or was it a playbook? Is it a playbook they can invoke whenever they want to scare the what out of the population, and take their eye off of themselves and have them look at the divine is coming, and you're what, insignificant, powerless, can't do anything about it, and that's just the way it is. The end of the world as you know it is coming, and this theme has been reignited. I think they counted 6 times in the last 200 years, where people swore that it was the end times, and then started trying to interpret current day events into the seals and signs that said this is how it's all going to happen. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, and I think it's very perceptive of you. And we just had, the last one we had really was the September 23 Revelation 12 sign and all the hoopla about that being the end of the world. And I actually have a book about that. And if you go back, it's 6, 7, 8 times that we've set the end of the world. So, congratulations, Jim. We survived the end of the world again.
6 times. Right. Again. Right.
The thing that I find so interesting is that all the way down till the 15th, 16th century, the unchallenged position of the church was that the book of Revelation is history, that it talks about the rise of the Roman Catholic Church, that it identifies the papacy as the seat of Antichrist, and that everything that happened in the book of Revelation was historical. Now, when the Protestant Reformation came out and started saying, look, the Pope is the Antichrist, Revelation is history, what was launched was called the Counter-Reformation by a guy named Loyola, the leader of the Jesuits. His name escapes me now.
Yeah, the Jesuit leader.
Ignatius of Loyola.
Ignatius of Loyola.
And then a guy named Francisco Ribera wrote this book which introduced the idea of the seals and plagues of Revelation being future, that introduced the idea of the tribulation being future, that introduced the idea of the rapture, that introduced the idea that the Antichrist was going to be some spiritual boogeyman in the future. And it was in response to the Protestant Reformation. So the Jesuits created everything that we know today, Jim, as eschatology. Rebuilt temple, Jesuit doctrine. Rapture, Jesuit doctrine. Tribulation, Jesuit doctrine. Second coming of Christ, Jesuit doctrine. And now you've got these Protestants, and I could name some names, but I won't. Now you've got these Protestants that are teaching this as doctrine, and anybody that opposes them is wrong. And they're teaching Jesuit doctrine, which was created against the reformers that they claim to be Protestant children of.
Hey, Jeffrey, we're going to pick this up right after another short break here. Folks, it's the Truth Underground Show, 504-556-9696. We'll be right back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Truth Underground Show on WGSO Radio 990 on your AM dial in New Orleans. Jim Rivas, your guide through the forbidden zone as we pursue actual truth by sometimes deconstructing what we think is the truth to pursue what else could it mean. Ladies and gentlemen, lines are open tonight, 504-556-9696. We'll be going to those lines after the top of the hour break. Jeffrey, I have, by the way, Jeffrey Doherty is our special guest here tonight, and as usual, when we have a fantastic guest, I get almost mesmerized, I'm in the audience listening too, and making notes and just fascinating material. And due to time, Jeffrey, I'm going to try to confine us, at least for this show, to 3 topics that happen to have been on my list, but you laid them out. And 2, we'll talk at the top of the hour. I certainly want to have you back on because what people don't understand, and comment on this briefly, our whole view of our world and this world is so anchored in the Bibles, if you will, Judeo-Christian Bibles and the history of it. I mean, if this is a document that's been obfuscated, what does that say about our understanding of history in general?
That's a great point. And in many ways, Jim, the Roman Empire never fell. It just became a worldwide empire without borders. It's the same religion. It's the same government. It's the same people. It's really the same parts. They're, the same players, just different names. And when you think about it, the one thing that nobody knows, and I can't understand why it took some, former crazy Pentecostal evangelists to actually bring this out, that the New Testament that we have, Jim, and this is crucial. You know, you've got the whole original sin thing. You've got the whole human sacrifice and cannibalism thing. And then the New Testament itself, we know when these books were written, Jim. We know exactly when these books were written, the dates of these books. There's 27 of them in the New Testament. And you think, oh, it's Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans, Corinthians, the rest of Paul's letters, and then we cap it off with Revelation. You know, it's very nice. They talk about Jesus and what a nice guy he was. And then Paul comes in and really teaches us the true doctrine. And then we cap it off with a little bit of prophecy from Revelation. Only problem is that's not the way it was written. The book is completely, totally jumbled out of its chronological order. Matthew wasn't the first book written. It was near the end. The first book written was James, then Thessalonians, then Corinthians. So the whole order is jumbled. And the reason why it's jumbled, Jim, is because if you read the New Testament, and I challenge your listeners who think I'm crazy, think I'm ugly, and my mom dresses me funny, think I'm an antichrist, I challenge you to do this. Google or use your favorite search engine for New Testament books in chronological order. If you read them, you will see without a doubt that the New Testament was a Twitter war, Jim. It was a war between the apostles of the Christ and the followers of Paul, going back and forth, two competing religions. And like everything else, Jim, history's written by the winners. Rome and Paul won.
Well, and
that's what we have.
Well, in the Council of Nicaea, that's a predominant theme. There were hundreds, of sects, but digging even deeper, there were two primary threads, if you will, and lots of sub-threads. But you're exactly right. So you had the two main players, in what did you call Paul's disciples, if you will, or the followers of what Paul said, and then the stories of Christ from his actual disciples. Now, just some of these concepts just to keep moving here, because we could, you can't even get to splitting atoms on the Council of Nicaea in a 2-hour terrestrial radio show, much less maybe 2-month-long radio show, right? Because there's a lot there. That's profound. So, but there's a couple of key provisions in Christian, in the Christian belief system, if you will, or the Bible, okay, that if they're not correct, pretty profoundly changes what the followers think in terms of the chronology of things. One that comes to mind, okay, and I have rapture number 3 here, and we'll wander into that here in the next hour. But the first one is this whole concept of the return of Christ, all right? And, there are those who go back to the original Hebrew of in some of the texts of the time, if you will, and retranslate them, and they believe that the words say that Christ's appearance on earth at that time was his appearance on earth. Okay, was in fact, he's not actually going to return; that he was returning. Then, is there, what do you say about that?
Well, it's interesting you should ask that, Jim, because there's a passage in the Bible. It's in Luke chapter 17, where the religious people, the Pharisees, came to the Christ and they said, "Listen, tell us when your second coming is going to occur. Tell us what signs to look for. Tell us what's going to happen. What can we see? How will we know?" And the Christ looked at him and said, "What are you guys talking about? There won't be any second coming. The kingdom of God," and he said this word for word, "does not come with observable signs." So forget about your vials, forget about your trumpets, forget about your September 23, Revelation 12 signs. The Christ said no signs, because why? He said, don't look over here, don't look over there, because the kingdom of God has already come in you. So this whole game of look for signs is a Jesuit psyop being continued on by the children of the reformers who gave their lives against it. It's madness, Jim, but there are no signs, and the Christ said it plain as day, and somehow we can't see the nose on our theological faces.
Well, I think it's very parallel to this modern day concept. Let's take Planet X paradigmers, right? So the people who follow that and want to know when's it coming, when's it coming, when's it coming, why do they want to know that? because they're not ready now, and they figure if they can wait till just the last minute before it comes, then they can be ready and not take any chances about, say, living a cleaner, more sustainable life now, right? In other words, just simply being ready for any kind of catastrophic event, right? And so they're trying to hedge their bets. And it almost seems like this is the same kind of thing where, if they can obfuscate, the return of Christ, then we have, it's a control. It's like a yo-yo, right? They can control populations and keep them in fear when Christ returns. Or in some cases, everybody, we're looking forward to Christ's return. And the whole premise is right now is horrible. That'll be better. And, it's like letting people, having them live and enjoy their misery of the day because better times are coming. And that's the whole theme. What are your thoughts on that?
Unfortunately, as you know, and people that have studied communication and human behavior know, fear of loss is, unfortunately, a more powerful motivator than hope for gain. So when you've got this religious stick of the second coming, don't miss the rapture, it's very, 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 very powerful. And then you have a little carrot about heaven. And I guess Planet X is kind of the hell for people that don't believe the Bible.
Right. And this horrible outcome and everything. Well, Jeffrey, that music means that the show's going Warp Factor 10 as we thought it would. It certainly did. We have a top of the hour break. We'll be back, folks, in just a few minutes with Jeffrey Doherty and dive in deeper. This is the Truth Underground Show. We'll be right back.
All I'm offering is the truth.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it.
I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
We all need to learn as much as we can about everything that we can, because one thing I have learned in my life is that most of what we have ever been taught has been a lie, has been a lie, has been a lie, has been a lie.
All right, everyone. We're back for hour 3 of the Truth Underground Show on WGSO Radio 990 on your AM dial in New Orleans. Live stream over the internet at WGSO.com or use the TuneIn app if you're listening from your smartphone or want to on the go. My name is Jim Rivas. I'm your host and guide into the world of alternative possibility, the WAP as we call it here. And for the next and third hour of tonight's installment of the Truth Underground Show, we're going to slide a little deeper into the rabbit hole. Join the conversation tonight. Lines are open in this segment, 504-556-9696. We're going to return to our special guest, Jeffrey Doherty. And Jeff, I guess I shouldn't be surprised at how fast the show's going tonight because this is a topic, as I think you can tell. And ladies and gentlemen, Jeffrey and I did not have a chance to connect before the show. So these questions I'm asking Jeffrey really come from my own research, my own thoughts about it, and observations. And I guess a lot of it's just gut feeling, quite frankly, Jeffrey. I mean, I guess you had some of that when you got into all this, right?
Absolutely. And, always, Jim, there's, so we go so deep and we're lightly touching on all these subjects. And if people want to find out more, the best place is just to go to my YouTube channel, which is Jeffrey Doherty Show or Christian Whistleblower. And I like to say that all of my heresy is in one place there. So there's 1,100 videos plus, so you can find out just about anything you want to know about what we're talking about and look at the source information, the proof. Because I'm I'm a college-trained anthropologist, so I'm very empirical in my study, and I'm very objective. So you can find all the data and the background on my YouTube channel.
Yeah, and Jeffrey, we'll go back and remind everybody of that before the end of the show. And yet, we've got the lines open. We've got a couple of people holding right now, and I tell you what, why don't we go to calls? A couple have been hanging on for a little while here, and then if we're not asked this by a caller, we'll visit a couple of these other concepts. And,
sounds great.
Yeah, so let's go. We got Dotsy and Metairie on the line. Dotsy, are you there?
Hi, Jim.
Hello.
Yeah, please do go to his heresy channel, the Grafton Whistleblower. Jim, did you do any research into this guy at all? Seriously?
Yes, I did. I have.
Why don't you get somebody legitimate like Carl Gallup L.A. Marzulli, Russ Dizdar. This guy goes, he's like water finding its level. He's trying to make money in the paranormal industrial complex. He's tried everything. Now he's a college-trained anthropologist, an exorcist, and the whistleblower. He's a fraud. He's an absolute fraud. Get somebody legitimate. This guy goes with anything. He's trying to make money in the paranormal industrial complex. You could get somebody really legitimate like Carl Gallups or Russ Dizdar or even L.A. Marzulli would probably come on. This guy's a fraud.
Well, would they actually say the same things, though? I have watched material on all these folks. And, you know, Dotsy, let me just say this about research and truth, all right, and pursuit of it. You know, there are people who've done all different types of research. And to say, oh, he's trying to make money at it. Well, hold on a second.
He goes from one to the other. And today he's an exorcist, but he used to be Mandela Effect, and he used to be Paul the Antichrist, and he used to be Jesus the Antichrist. He'll go with he'll say anything to make money.
Did it ever occur to you that some of these things are related, by the way? Because my research points to the fact that they're all related to some degree. And
take a look
if
at
I put my resume up there, and I'm going to let Jeffrey fend for himself, but let me just say this: if I put my resume up there, the things that I do, then all the different things, the hats that I wear, then I would, you know, I'd be. You might say the same about me. Oh, you do anything to make buck? No, I'm just like anybody else. You know, I have my passions in life. I pursue them. Sure, Jeffrey's the same way. And if you get into this information, it ebbs and flows. It takes you in different places. Jeffrey, what say you?
Well, first of all, I appreciate, you know, Dotsy listening, and I have respect for anybody that's, you know, listening to this type of information and going out of their way. I mean, she could be watching who's getting voted off the island or whatever, but she's at least has a mind where she's looking at and understanding this. And you know what she needs to understand possibly, and by the way, I would love to debate L.A. Marzulli. If you could put that together, Jim, I would love to debate L.A. Marzulli. I've challenged him. He hasn't seemed fit to take up the challenge, but I would love to. But at any rate, I've been doing this for now 35 years, and over 35 years, I have talked about some different things. And as to making money, Jim, I walked away from a job where I was making high six figures to do this. I quit, sold my house, sold my Land Rover, sold my Rolexes. I live in a mobile home. I drive a PT Cruiser, and we're putting everything we have into getting this truth out. So if I'm trying to make money doing this, Jim, I'm doing it the wrong way. Trust me.
Well, Jeffrey, and let me tell you, from knowledge, direct experience and knowledge, you know, the truth pursuit industry is not a high profit or a high prosperity industry. You know, telling a lot of lies is, but when you're drilling into the truth, especially more over the target you are, the harder it is to make a go of it is the actual business itself. So I personally understand that. And not everyone else does. And it's very easy
for people like Dotsy to go ad hominem. He's a bad guy. He's this, he's that. Forget about me. Look at the facts. Look at the information that I present. If you have a problem with some of the data I presented, some of the verses I presented, I'm here to discuss it and debate it, and maybe you'll prove me wrong. But just to say I'm ugly and my mom dresses me funny and I'm a thief, she's better than that, and I think we deserve better than that.
I think so, too. Well, and Dotsy's a regular caller. Dotsy, we do appreciate your call. But, right, the ad hominems, there's no way to go with it. You know, you can't have an intellectual debate about ad hominem attacks or this because you're simply being dismissive about, you know, and say there's somebody more credible. How do we know who's credible? And I, as a side, and I certainly position myself on this show, I'm just simply trying to sort through the information. And if we don't have everybody that we can get at the table to put their thoughts in, look, we had a guest on, just a few months ago that said, you know, all you need is the King James Bible and you're good. And he was a fascinating interview. You know, it was a great interview. A lot of his information was very credible about the deep state, the nature of the military. You know, he was a great guest. That was his conclusion. At the end, it was like, that's it. It's all you need. The end of the world's coming and you need your King James Bible. And I, personally, to me, that rang a little hollow in terms of of a complete solution. And Jeff, and I'm going to let you answer. Do you have a panacea answer for our audience here?
I really don't. I don't think there are any easy answers. But again, Jim, if you can get L.A. Marzulli on for a debate, I'm your huckleberry.
You got it. I'll put it on my list, and I have a couple of good producers that work with me here. So we'll see what we can put together, because all we're interested in is simply looking at all the different possibilities, quite frankly, because this information, and ladies and gentlemen, this is fact. A lot of what Jeffrey's talking about is some of his conclusions. There's certainly questions that I had, and I put it out to my producer, said, who out there, go find me somebody who is questioning these same topics, because my own research is leading me to question this stuff. And that's actually how Jeffrey ended up on a Truth Underground show. It wasn't, let's have Jeffrey on, because he's, he talks about this stuff, particularly to introduce these ideas. This is the direction our research, because, one of the reasons I don't do 5 nights a week show, Jeffrey, and for everyone out there, is because the time that goes into doing one of these shows, I do basically 5 days, 3 to 4 hours a day of research. What do? I absorb the material that's out there, and I look for common threads. And this keeps coming up, that there's some interrelation between, and again, I don't know who the they is, yet they've got their fingerprints in time. And my point about bringing the Bible and looking at it is because their fingerprints in time. And, I don't care whether it's a Jesuit priest or who. And, again, I had an uncle who was a Jesuit priest who, off the record, would openly discuss these topics and say some surprising things about the doctrine, if you will. And mostly it was, we don't really know. Who really knows was kind of the answer about it. And we don't have time to go to our next caller. We're going to go to him when we come back from the next hour. But music's starting up. I don't know if we have a lot of time. When we come back, we'll one of the areas I do want to visit, too, with Jeffrey is, rapture. We talked about the return of Christ. We've got Antichrist, and rapture is these different things. Some of my guests have called those metaphors, and different labels attached to these ideas. And, they come from the Bible, and for some folks, it's doctrine. They'll quote Bible and verse. Folks, this is the Truth Underground Show. We'll be right back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Truth Underground Show on WGSO Radio 990 on your AM dial. This is Jim Rivas here, hosting Guide to the Forbidden Zone, the WAP, the world of alternative possibility, as we pursue actual, factual truth. Lines are open, 504-556-9696. Now, let's get back into the world of alternative possibilities here with our special guest, Jeffrey Doherty. Jeff, let's get to the just a couple of topics, if we can. If we can do this in 2 minutes before I get back to the lines, because the time clock's ticking. It's all moving very fast, as we suspect it normally does on terrestrial. Rapture, in and of itself, I want to hear what you say before I throw out what I say. Put it that way.
Absolutely. The rapture was basically Paul's response to being called out by James. The first book in the New Testament was the book of James, which identified Paul as preaching a doctrine that was in opposition to the Christ and his apostles. Paul used classic Clintonian, Obamian technique by creating this rapture thing to completely take the focus off of him being a false apostle. It pretty much lay dormant after that until the late 1500s, when the Jesuit priest Francisco Ribera wrote the book that was called the Book of Revelation and Commentaries on the Apostle John, which revised the rapture, made it a future event, along with a future temple, future tribulation, the Pope not being the Antichrist, but the Antichrist being a future supernatural boogeyman. So the rapture is just part of the whole Jesuit eschatology deception that I can't believe Protestants are falling for, including the aforementioned L.A. Marzulli, by the way. And it was invented by people that were against the Protestant reformers, whose sons and daughters they claim to be. So the rapture is all part of that Jesuit stew.
And for those who don't know, rapture is a concept that essentially, if you're Christian, just blanket, if you're Christian, right before the tribulation, we're all going to be taken off the earth, and returned after the tribs are over, something to that effect, right? And then walk with Christ for 1,000 years thereafter. I've heard different versions of it.
But even more interestingly, Jim, Paul talks about we won't be changed. The dead won't put on, the corruption won't put on incorruptibility till the last trump. That doesn't happen until way into the book of Revelation. So depending upon whether you're a mid-tribber or a post-tribber, there's going to be zombies in heaven that make the rapture for at least 3.5 years. So we better pray that Rick and Michonne and Daryl and some of those people from The Walking Dead make the rapture, because there's going to be zombies in heaven if Paul's correct.
Yeah, that's, again, I have questions about that. And really, again, it's one of these, concepts of reward, unconditional reward, because in the rapture, it's essentially all living as well as all Christians that ever lived, right? Souls will be raised and will walk with Christ. So, we'll leave here for the tribulations, fits nicely in the whole Planet X paradigm, by the way.
Right.
So we'll be
the
taken
Walking
off the
Dead
earth.
will be raised first.
Right. Shifted out of here. Boom. Whatever's coming hits. It's all over. Then we're back restored. That's, first off, Christ didn't talk about this, correct?
No, in fact, he said he talked against it, specifically against it.
Yeah, it would seem to make sense. Okay. Look, let's go to the lines. We have Joseph Metter. He's been holding on for a while, too. And you two guys would probably have a lot of fun talking about numerology, but that's not the topic tonight. So, Joseph, what say you? Welcome back to the Truth Underground show.
We won't go there with numerology, but numerology does, and gematria. That's the Hebrew Kabbalistic approach to numerology. It's taught me more about the belief that, I should say, that you could put a lot of trust in that book of Revelation. A lot more than I think your guest wants to. But does your guest say that the book of Revelation was not written by St. John?
I don't know. Ask him directly. Jeffrey, what do you say?
I think that my studies, again, over 35 years, indicate that parts of the book of Revelation were written by John. I don't think the entirety of the book of Revelation was written by him, but I do think that significant parts of it are written by John.
Well, I'm pretty much a believer in the book of Revelation in terms of, I should say the revelation of St. John the Divine. But let me, by the way, you made me like you when you said I'm your Huckleberry. That'll kill his favorite line is Doc Holliday from the movie Tombstone. When he
you're a daisy if you do, Joseph.
You remember that when he took on Johnny Ringo at the end of the movie?
Yep,
absolutely. Well, we won't go there. That we get off the subject. But the thing is, what's of interest to me, first of all, yes, a lot of Christianity was spread through the use of the sword. The Roman army did become an instrument of that movement of spreading Christianity at times with the sword. You remember that I think Christ said, go make disciples of all nations. Now, what's of interest to me about that, if you really start to dig into the Roman Empire, when the Roman Empire was on the decline, it needed the Roman ruling class, the patricians, did want to continue to have experience the good life. They were the top 1% of their day, just like we have an oligarchical top 1% here in this country. The top 1% here in this country, the oligarchy here, they don't want to lose the good times. They don't want to see it disappear. And the Roman ruling class of the day back then, they didn't want to see the Roman Empire disappear and decline, and they didn't want to go to work. They wanted their slaves, and they wanted the empire to provide them with the good life. So
they want a status quo, but if they want it to be blessed, if you will, keep going.
Well, here's what I'm starting to see. When Christ never did, unfortunately, as far as I know, this is the way it is. Christ never really preached against slavery. Never did. It was not. We don't see that in the teachings of Jesus Christ. So now Zoroaster, the teachings of Zoroaster was the spiritual leader of that movement, which dominated the Persian Empire. And the Persians did forbade slavery. Zoroaster did not approve of slavery. And the Persian Empire was not, at least under the teaching the Zoroaster, it was not a slave empire like we saw with the Roman Empire. So anyway, the thing is, the Romans wanted the good life to continue. Now, I think what they saw through eventually adopting Christianity as the religion of the empire, the official religion of the empire. And this came, of course, after that battle of that bridge. I can't think of the name of that bridge between the two Roman Empire armies. Constantine led one army. He said, he had the night before, he says, I had a dream. We will win this battle if you put the cross on your shields. And his army was outnumbered. And obviously they wanted a sign from God to give them the thumbs up they were going to win. And the pagan army didn't have this sign on their shields, and Constantine's army won. But here's something that's interesting. Constantine is credited with being the first emperor of the Christian emperor of the Roman Empire. But he didn't convert to Christianity until the last minute on his deathbed. On his deathbed. So, you see, when I look at that movie, The Da Vinci Code, there's so much politics in play.
Yes.
In the evolution of Christianity as to become the religion of the Roman Empire. And don't forget, it was the experience of the Roman Empire that shaped what we would call the Western world today.
Today.
So what you're thinking, so what you're looking at.
Yep. We're running out of. We got a little time problem here, Joseph. That music, you know what that means. We're about to go into break. Great thoughts, Joseph. Thanks. Yeah, hold your thought. We will. Folks, we got a break coming up here. We'll be back here with our special guest, Jeffrey Doherty, and just a few seconds. This is the Truth Underground Show. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Truth Underground Show on WGSO Radio 990 on your AM dial in New Orleans. This is Jim Rivas, your guide through the Forbidden Zone as we pursue actual factual truth, trying to discern it out of this cloud of information out there in all areas, everything. And basically, I like to think of there's no sacred cows when you're searching for the actual truth, because there are threads, it lies everywhere. Lines are open tonight, folks. 504-556-9696. We have a special guest on the line with us tonight, Jeffrey Doherty. But before we get back into the meat of that conversation, we've got a caller who calls in pretty regularly here and has always got something to say that'll fire up the conversation. Phil the Patriot, what do you have to say tonight?
Hey, good evening, brother and sister, Christian American patriotic hostages. The Truth Underground is on the air. Hope you can handle the truth, because only the truth can set America and the whole world free from the New World Satanic Order and the One World Devil government movements. The truth is that the higher-ups of the Protestant, Jesuit, and especially the so-called Catholic churches are actually parts and make up the whole body of the worldwide Church of Satan and the modern-day shadow government movements. The recent Valentine's Day school massacre is just one of the beginning attacks and stealth demonic terrorist movements that the Nazi, fascist, Luciferian lunatics, NFL have planned for America and the whole world. And I'm not just talking about football. Wake up, stand up, rise up, and rise up. Roddy Piper, the recently murdered actor, and the movie They Live, the famous movie They Live, can't wake you up. So wake up now and get ready now!
All right, Phil the Patriot. Oh, geez, and what, one thing I was thinking as Phil was talking there, Jeffrey, is, we all have these areas of research. You have your areas of specialization, and there's this common thread here. And again, we don't know who the they is behind it, but it's like it's a movement, it's a control system over humanity, and I think my whole, I guess, problem, or for lack of another word of it, and why look at the Bible just like I would look at how the Constitution's being attacked and ripped apart and obfuscated, right? And the news is cooked every night, is because we've placed a lot of trust and faith in the document, the Bible, and the religious structures, and yet these entities, globalists, whatever they are, people, things, spirit, we don't know. Satan himself, right? What we know of is Satan is obfuscating, such an important part of our world. I mean, what does that say? So people believe, end up perhaps believing in the wrong things, making them more malleable. I don't know the answer. So what's the of knowing this information? And perhaps whether you believe it or not, or subscribe to it, what's the positive side of this, having this knowledge? Because I don't sense you're just attacking the church and those constructs because you have a beef with them, per se. It seems very analytical to me.
Yeah, I think the key of it is that, Mark Twain said that it's easier to fool someone than to convince them that they've been fooled. And my whole idea is believe what you want to believe, but know why you believe what you want to believe. So I consider myself a person that's putting all the information out there so people can decide what they want to do with it. So know what lies beneath the foundation of your religion. And, like Phil the Patriot was saying, if you know the truth can set you free. But if you don't know the truth's not going to set you free. It's only the truth you know that can set you free. So the question that the people that the Truth Underground audience, the great station that you're on audience, the Christian Whistleblower audience, you have to ask yourself is, what you going to do now that the truth has broken out all over you, brother?
Right. And, I think it's the same thing. Fundamentally, I know my own personal human experience, and that's all I can speak about, is, my goal is to be a better human, live a higher spiritual life, be happy, spread happiness, prosperity, those types of things. And anything gets in the way of that or makes it more difficult to do that with myself and others is, it's probably there for a reason, right? And that reason isn't congruent with my own objectives. So that's really, that's one of my main personal reasons why I do this. It's like, this is, aside from the fact it can be very dangerous, you witness the church now, the current pope, some of the things they're talking about very much aligned with the globalists, kind of scary, or even this alien paradigm, how are we going to welcome and baptize aliens in? I mean, where exactly, what are the boundaries here, if there are any?
Think of it this way, Jim. If you believe, the Christ said there's two main things. Love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. And that always confused me. I'm not taught how to love my neighbor as myself. How can I love my neighbor as myself if I believe that I'm filled with original sin and at best I'm a sinner saved by grace? If I'm a sinner, if I've got original sin, then I can't even trust me. And Jim, if I can't trust me, it's guaranteed I can't trust you. So I look at you with suspicion. I look at you, I got to keep my eye on you. But once I understand that I've got the spark of divinity within me, then I can love me. And then I can look at you and love you too and say, Jim's got the spark of divinity just like me. So now instead of being suspicious of him, now instead of trying to keep it at arm's length, I can welcome you in. I can trust you, and we can grow together. And that whole divide and conquer paradigm is destroyed. And I'm convinced that's what Pauline Christianity did it for. Original sin, can't trust yourself, can't trust your brother. The Christ said we all got the spark of divinity within. We can trust each other, and we can join hands together and fight against the real enemies of humanity.
Well, and just what I've learned from you tonight, Jeffrey, it's got the signature of these paradigms we deal with in modern times. Here we had something very good and pure. Christ being on this planet and his message and getting to know God, and then humans with an agenda got involved, right? And scrambled it up to their own means. the Middle Ages control. Basically, if you were a serf back then, right, and lived in total squalor, and yet you were, as you said, by conquest, now a member of the church, and you said, well, it's okay that this life is really horrible because the next one's great. The kingdom of God is fantastic. Well, it was fantastic before then, right? But is that an excuse for having your experience in this reality so horrible too? I don't think so. That's a part of this whole, religious structure and the teachings of the church that I always had a problem with. I said, well, why do we have to be unhappy and miserable here, right? And then wait for some future outcome, and obviously if we pass the judgment test of God and their version of God is just, go look at the pictures in the Vatican, right? I mean, the paintings on the wall is a pretty scary, it's a scary depiction.
It is indeed.
It doesn't fit with the message of Jesus Christ of love, okay? And
not at all.
It's right there. I like love. I love, I like living that life. It's so easy. Life gets so easy when you can just unconditionally love yourself and others that a lot of these things, first off, they become easy to see. And second off, it's just an easier way to live. No drama, no chaos, strife gone. And they, obviously, to control us, need us angry, upset with each other, divide and conquer. We've heard that on this show, right? Why turn this population against that population? Why have all these factions warring? Because while we're warring, we're not watching what they're doing is one reason, right? And I still don't know. I mean, there's so many parts of this that are, and obviously in a 2-hour interview, we can hardly scratch the surface of your work. And so everybody, we do want, for those of you who do want to dig into more and learn what Jeffrey's work is, Jeffrey, share it with us again. You have a YouTube channel. It's called, I didn't get it when you first said it. It's,
the easiest way to find it is either just look for Jeff Daugherty Show on YouTube or look for the Christian Whistleblower. And Jim, if we can get rid of this concept of original sin and replace it with what the Christ said, that we got the spark of divinity within, then the fear and guilt control matrix crumbles. Then the divide and conquer matrix crumbles, and we can all get together and fight against the real enemies of humanity. And I think we can win, my brother.
I do too. I think I totally agree, and my colleagues all know that here in the Truth Underground, that I truly believe that we can win. But we first have to identify whatever it is that's working against us. That's working against this, basically working against love. When it's all said and done, it's a neat way to encapsulate it. And
absolutely, there's no them, only us, and nobody's free till we're all free.
Exactly. They keep layering this playbook, re-executing the playbook over and over and over again. And and we'll talk about that. We got one more segment coming up in the show. Jeff, you're good to stay through for the final segment of tonight's Truth Underground show?
Actually, I do have to leave right now.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Well, folks, Jeff, thanks you for being here. I hope you'll join us again on a future Truth Underground shows. We'll drill into some of these details. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Daugherty, again, I hope trust you got the information. I'll share it with you when we get back. This is the Truth Underground show. We'll be right back. Thanks, Jeffrey, for joining us tonight.